Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 131 of the In a Nutshell podcast. I'm your host, Sean Vowells. I've got Joe Meade with me, and today it's a little bit of a basketball update, Joe. A lot of games have happened. We've had a couple of Big Ten conference games, a few non-con games here as we're in the middle of December. We're getting that little two for a Big Ten game. We're getting some of the marquee non-conference games. It's been about a week since we've updated it, Joe. So let's move the calendar back to Tuesday. We had a couple of big games here between Big Ten teams, and we had your Michigan Wolverines in a non-conference game. But, Joe, let's start with Michigan because I think they are the biggest story in the Big Ten. An 89-61 victory over Villanova here, and that was a really generous score line to the Wildcats, as the viewers can see here. Michigan up by 30 at halftime, and they actually get outscored in the second half. And then Michigan goes in on the road to Maryland, who plays just about a perfect offensive game and still loses by 18. So how about this week for Michigan, Joe? A good win over a team in Villanova that's been a little bit more solid than people have given them credit for, and you parlay that into a win on the road against Maryland. Michigan seems to have kept this momentum rolling from Players era.
Yeah, I completely agree, Sean. And probably the most encouraging trend, other than what we've talked about in the past episodes, has been the coming on of Elliot Cadeau. I think a lot of people were worried about him transferring in from North Carolina, where he led the nation, or at least was at the very forefront of the nation of turnovers for point guards. This year, he's toned it down a lot. On Tuesday, you saw him score 18 points against Villanova. Last night, 12 points, 10 assists against Maryland. This is a guy who, when he keeps the ball out of the other team's hands, makes really good things happen. And with the weapons on this team, Yaxel Lendeborg being the most dangerous, and then the post presence down low. It's usually only one of Perez or a Mara has to play well. They kind of both played pretty decent against Villanova on Tuesday, 11 and 7, and then last night a Mara with 18 points. Perez Johnson did not probably had his worst game so far all year, and it still didn't matter. Tuesday they only shoot 27% from three, 9 of 33, and then last night they shoot, I believe, 62% from three. So this is a team that finds different ways to win. They're certainly not afraid to shoot the three-pointer. Again, they shot 33 of them when they shot 27%. And that's because they're higher quality looks. People were wondering, oh, why Elliot Cadeau over Trey Donaldson? I think the big thing Elliot Cadeau brings over Trey Donaldson, he facilitates and moves the offense a lot better. He gets guys better looks, and he allows the post players. We have two traditional ones now in the lineup at any time. And last year, you only had one in Vlad Golden. So now you could pack the paint, you could dominate down there, yet you still have to respect the 3-point shooting of Michigan. So I think this has been a really good recipe, Sean. It's allowed them to fend off attacks. And we've now seen the upset recipe for teams that are 6 or 7 deep without a significant height advantage. They're going to try to hit a bunch of threes, get high quality threes, try to get some extra chances on the offensive rebounding glass, which is tough considering Michigan's still the number one defensive rebounding team. And I think that's what you're going to see a lot of teams outside of the Michigan States, the Purdue's, the Illinois, and even the Nebraskas of the world try to do to Michigan.
These two games have been very easy, and I don't know if either of these two teams are tournament teams, but Michigan certainly made them look bad. You just are getting such a different look depending on who's on the floor and in what position. I think Yaxel's doing a lot better in terms of playing a little bit better wing than forward. And then, nobody gets to 30 minutes. Nobody actually gets over 25 against Villanova. And then against Maryland, a team which, had a perfect offensive performance. Yaxel and Cadeau are the only ones over 30. And you're getting good bench production. This is a really sustainable way of winning basketball games. And Joe, Villanova with just 6 assists and Maryland with just 9. That means Michigan is forcing a lot of one-on-one action. And when you have the defenders that Michigan does, that is how, you're not going to be efficient if you're constantly going with the isolation. And Michigan seems to be doing that. I just want to pull this thing up on Torvik for a second. Maryland's offensive rating in this game against Michigan, Joe, was a 146.6. That is like unbelievably good, and they lost by 18. That just shows how good. Hey,
Yeah.
look at this, 146.8 actually. I shorted them 200ths. This is not anywhere near any of their previous performances. They had one at 120, but that means against an average defense, they would score 1.46 points per possession, which is obviously incredible. And it was nowhere near enough to beat Michigan on their own floor. So I think Michigan, I don't know if they're upset proof, but I think that sort of eliminates like half the teams and able to beat them, even when things go perfectly. So things are obviously very good for Michigan. Joe, let's go to this other Big Ten game on Tuesday. Both of these teams played in interesting games on the weekend, too. This is my Indiana Hoosiers against Penn State. Indiana coming into this game off of the loss to Louisville, and offensively, they were firing on all cylinders, 113-72. Lamar Wilkerson with 44 points, hits 10 threes, which is an Indiana record at Assembly Hall, and Indiana cruises to a huge win over Penn State. Now, we obviously know what happened next to both of these teams, but this is the formula for winning games for the Hoosiers.
Yeah, I think shooting 55% from three might not be replicated, but against a team like Penn State, we're going to get high quality looks. I think uh, this was the perfect get back game, which Sean indicated to the last episode. Sean, I'm going to let you take over here. What are the main trends you've seen from Indiana, especially in this game, or is it something that was just probably a blip?
Um, we've seen a lot of different versions of Indiana already, and knowing what happened on Saturday, we'll sort of parlay this conversation together. Joe, Kentucky wins 72-60 at Rupp Arena last night. That didn't really tell the story of the game. Um, Indiana was winning for probably 3/4 of it, and then sort of just like withered under a lot of pressure and foul trouble, and a team that knew sort of they could throw everything at the glass and get second chance points, and that's what happened here. This isn't a scoreline that really favors Indiana much, but this was a pretty even game. You know, both teams didn't look great offensively, and it was Kentucky that were able to, get a few turnovers and get out in transition. But we've seen basically the good and the bad from Indiana this week in the extremes. We thought Indiana would be great offensively, Joe. It's actually not been that this year. They're top 20 in defense, and they're just barely top 50 in offense. So that formula does not seem to be the best way forward for Indiana. They're going to have to be more efficient on offense, especially once they start going up against these elite teams in the Big Ten.
And on the Kentucky game, Sean, were there any overarching concerns? And I know it might be a little early, but could you comment on what it might mean for Indiana's tournament status, or too early to
Yeah,
tell?
I mean, we're going to have to see. Analytically, they're in a really good spot. They're at 26th in the net right now. That doesn't seem. I don't want to say it doesn't seem right, but I think they're probably in like the 30 to 40 range. They're covering just about every game against low majors they've covered, and they obviously covered against Penn State by, I think, that was 14. So they third 26-point cover margin there. So we're just gonna have to see. Like, they are undersized. The whistle is a real problem. Like, if there's a quick whistle on the day, it's probably not going to be Indiana's day. And just about everybody had foul trouble in this one. Wilkerson, Bailey had 3 in the first half, and then when Wilkerson gets his 4th in the second half, the offense just stalled. They're not big enough to overcome like like foul trouble. They're just not. And I think we're going to see that probably happen a few more times this year. But the main concern for me, Joe, is that both of the road games, the Minnesota game and the Kentucky game, the game script has sort of gone the same. Indiana's played a pretty solid first half. They've been winning. It feels like that they're capable of playing better. It feels like they should be winning by more. In the second half, the home team makes some adjustments, brings the game close, and ends up breaking through. A true road game at Rupp Arena is hard, no matter how bad this Kentucky team is, and analytically they're not as bad as they may look in person. But non-conference, Joe, back to your question, They won 2 of their 4 Power 5 games. It turns out that Marquette and Kansas State aren't any good. They did smoke them both, though, so they're still analytical covers. But looking back at it, like, this is a missed opportunity for sure. Like, they had a real chance to win this game. They're 8-3 on the year, probably not the end of the world, but I think we're sort of back in line with preseason expectations for Indiana. But Joe, let's go back. Penn State, after getting just throttled on Tuesday at Assembly Hall, had quite the response on Saturdays. They hosted Tom Izzo and Michigan State, and they took them all the way down to the wire. This is a game that was a true toss-up, could have gone either way, but it's the Spartans via Divine Ogachukwu who get this job done, 76-72. Ogachukwu has 23 points, including 2 huge threes in the last minute and a half. What a huge statement of survival here for Michigan State. They get the job done.
Yeah, and what's funny, Sean, is we talked about after the Duke game a lot of optimism for Michigan State in spite of what probably was their, I mean, obviously their one loss, but we'd consider a missed opportunity at home at the Breslin there. This was, I don't want to say similar game script, but kind of what you mentioned last time, Sean, about the Michigan State conundrum. If you're never going to blow them out, you're going to have to kind of go pound for pound with them. And in this game, we saw Penn State do it, and a huge credit to Mike Rhodes and that team. The problem was, Sean, let's just get down to it. Penn State can't make the plays. The missed free throws at the end, the inability to close out and whatnot, right? And a lot of their possessions. I know they wanted to drain clock, but to not start any motion till 10 seconds left in the shot clock on 3 of their last 5 possessions, where 2 of them they could have taken full control and the 2 possession lead late. That's not going to get it done against Michigan State. You're going to have to be the aggressor. You're playing a top 10 team at home, and I your shot. Michigan State in the closing stretch is one of the best teams in the country.
And I actually thought like Penn State did a decent enough job of getting open shots here. I think there's some Michigan State defensive concerns maybe, but they just didn't come through when the lights were the brightest. Like they had a few open threes, they missed the shots. Michigan State made them, and that's why the Spartans got out of there with a win. There were, like I said, some defensive issues for Michigan State. This was just like they made the shots when against Duke they didn't. And you can say the level of opposition obviously matters here, but they showed some growth. Last week they potentially don't win this game. They make some threes, which they didn't do last time. But Joe, the minutes allocation here is something that I think we need to mention. There was a change in the starting lineup. You have Ogachukwu in. All the starters play at least 27 minutes and play the bulk of the time. That would be Kohler, Carr, Cooper, Ogachukwu, and Fears. And then you have Scott with 17 minutes off the bench, Tang with 12, McCulloch with 10. But you have Trey Fort down to 4 minutes, Wojcik down to 6, Ward down to 5. It's clear that Tom Izzo made a little bit of a tweak in the minutes here, and maybe that's what led to a little bit of miscommunication on defense. But at the end of the day, the guy he put in there went 8 for 10 and 5 for 5 from 3 and probably won them the game. So what do you think
Probably saved them in the game.
What do you think about these changes from Izzo?
I think they're a little interesting considering they were 8-1 and they were playing really well, including the Duke game.
And they were coming off a week.
Yeah, so I don't know if this is him doing permanent changes or testing out changes for later in the year. The bottom line is
3.
Nagels around a little more, and the next 3 games you're going to be able to get away with it on the scoreboard. But whatever he's trying to figure out, I hope he figures out by January 2nd, because that game on Peacock, unfortunately, on a Friday night, that looks a lot more challenging than it did a month ago. Let's call it what it is.
Yeah, so I think you make these changes, you wait a game, right? Because Penn State is, look, they're not good, and the bottom of this Big Ten is probably as bad as it's been for a while, but they're they're still like 106 in the net. They're not like a 200 team. It's a road game. It's a
Yeah.
noon tip, like off a week off. Like I think there were some preparation things that probably could have been a little better for Michigan State, but I think they get out of there with a sigh of relief and they get the 3 games before the new year. Maybe a few more, um, experiments that they can do there. They do have 3 home games in a row in January, Joe, and I don't know how this has come up, but it feels like every team has at least one stretch of this. Indiana has one at the end
Yeah.
of the year. I think maybe just making easier on travel, but um, Michigan State probably not going to learn a whole lot about them for the next couple of weeks. All right,
No.
Joe, we have got Nebraska and Illinois, and hold on, it did not load. Let me load it back in there. Okay. So we've got Nebraska who went on the road to Illinois, Joe. They led from essentially start to finish. Illinois ties the game with a 3 with 20 seconds left. Looks like they're going to get this thing to overtime. But Jamarcus Lawrence says no thank you. He bangs a 3 at the buzzer to give Nebraska their 11th win of the season. They're 11-0. Obviously, they have played a lot of lower competition. Their non-con games have been, mostly quad 2. Actually, all quad 2. This was their first quad 1 game, but they get the job done here. Joe, it seems like Nebraska keeps proving us wrong here.
Yeah, and one thing I also want to mention, Sean, they absolutely rushed Wisconsin out of their gym. That is not something
Yes.
that would ever going to be about a big card by 30 points. Uh, you know, kind of coaches around the conference. If you watch press conferences, obviously I'll watch Dusty Mays and Michigan's. They've taken slight notice of Nebraska over the last few weeks. Sam Hoiberg's been praised a lot. Obviously, Price Sanford, Rick Bass, those are guys that, have caught the attention of plenty of conference coaches over the years. But now it's a whole, I think it's fully out there. GD's out of the bottle for Nebraska. This is a team that could score well. I think they defend better than they have in the past as well, Sean. And most importantly, this is a team that didn't dig itself a hole. How often in the Fred Hoiberg era, Sean, have we described, if Nebraska didn't have these bad starts, they'd be in prime position. This is their best start under Fred Hoiberg. And I think with a guy like Price Sanford, that's probably going to be one of the most underrated transfer acquisitions in the conference. People will talk about the Yaxel Lendeborgs, probably the Lamar Wilkersons of the world and then around college basketball. Price Sanford's looking like the one of the best ones so far, too. I wouldn't want him to not get mentioned into that.
And Fred Hoiberg and Nebraska have really not scheduled very tough in the non-conference, and they've still lost a lot of those games. And this year, Joe, it hasn't, like, they're sort of like Indiana. Like, they played Kansas State, their rivalry game against Creighton. Creighton stinks. They've played at least another team here, and it's not loading in for me. But at this point, Joe, I think we're thinking, like, why didn't they take more risks in the non-conference? Like, they like Oklahoma, they played at home. Oklahoma's not great. New Mexico on a neutral, Kansas State on a neutral. Like, these are okay teams, but you know, and now we're looking at probably a top, probably in the 10 to 12 range in the AP poll, when it comes out tomorrow. Like, maybe they should have taken a bigger shot. And they're 2-0 in the Big Ten. Joe, they've beaten 2 teams who we think are probably, at least Wisconsin's got a chance of making the tournament, and Illinois definitely. They have 2 wins over tournament teams. Like, this formula is working for now. Like, they don't have a lot of depth. They don't play very fast. It's a half-court centric offense. They really play 8 players. They lost Connor Siege into the season, but this formula is working. They play 2 bigs. It's not in the traditional Big Ten sense where they're plotting and all that, but Price Sanford has 32 in this game against Illinois. 26 of it was in the first half. So Illinois did a pretty good job of quieting him down in the second half, but Mast with 17, Lawrence with 14, including the big 3 at the end, obviously. Nebraska, after this Illinois game, really shot up the net here up to 12, and it seems like they really needed that, just to have their numbers match up their record a little bit, because, like I said, they didn't play any great teams in the non-conference. But what do you think the ceiling is, Joe? Do you think they can maybe challenge that top tier, or do you think they're probably the best of the rest?
Gonna give you the politically correct answer. I'd really like to see how they line up against Michigan State on that game on January 2nd at home. I think that's probably the most exciting game of the Fred Hoiberg era in terms of anticipation. I think they're definitely tournament worthy, and I know that's pretty obvious right now. But going into the year, we didn't really think that, to be honest with you, Sean. We didn't love their depth. We thought defense would be a huge issue. We never thought scoring would be. But the way they've done it so far, uh, especially with this 11-0 head start, I'd say probably they could get into it. They're capable of, which is a huge compliment compared to what I thought they would be this year.
And I scrolled through Ken Palm here while you were going there, Joe. They're 21st in Ken Palm. They're one spot behind Iowa. They're 5 spots ahead of Indiana. Like, I think that they are the best of the rest is more appropriate than like Big Ten title contender. I do think Illinois is still a better team than them. Like, Merkovich and Petrovic were not really a part of this game, and it's unclear why that was. But I know they beat them at their place. But I think I still take Illinois and the three above them, obviously, and then Nebraska probably fifth for me if we did a Big Ten power rankings, which we'll probably get to here over the holidays. The games start to slow down, and we get a little more creative with some of our videos. But like, will this last over the 20 remaining games? Probably. Like, over the 20 games will be good. I just don't know if they can. Like, they're good. Are they really going to win more than 11 or 12 games, though? Like, maybe. They got that marquee road win. They probably just need to go 500 from here on out to have a pretty good
Yeah.
seed in the tournament. Well, after the remaining bye games, I think they have 2 more. But,
Don't lose those.
yeah, don't. Or that Illinois game goes down the drain. But
Yeah.
Nebraska, pleasant surprise here. They were deserving winners against Illinois here. Like, I thought Illinois, they got a few turnovers and made a few really tough shots to get this game back tied. I thought Keaton Wagler was pretty good, 19 and 10. What do you think here about the Illinois formula? And I think they're still probably the 4th best team in this league.
I agree. I thought, going back to Tuesday, Sean, they won a really tough game at Ohio State.
Yeah,
And that was a game they kept fending off Ohio State runs. They'd
sort of
be up
like the
6.
opposite of what happened here.
Yeah. Yeah, Bruce Thornton would come in. I thought they did a good job limiting Bruce Thornton. I thought they forced John Mobley Jr. into a lot of poor shots. They never really let Devin Royal get into a rhythm either, Sean. And then Keaton Wagler, obviously, the surprise of the night there. So Illinois, I think a lot of what they do is they're getting better looks overall this year. I still think they need to find that consistency. Obviously, from Tuesday to Saturday, they didn't have it to be at that elite level. But overall, still an improvement from last year. I do think that Brad Underwood will get after them over these next 13 days before their next conference opponent. So, I think overall, if I had to grade the first part of Illinois' year, I'd still probably give it a B plus, like not bad at all. But definitely that Nebraska win kind of tarnishes the first portion of their season so far.
And they do have a game against Missouri at home, um, a week from today when you're probably listening to this. Missouri comes up, or no, they played in St. Louis. So that's a neutral court game.
Yeah,
Missouri,
that's like the crossroads or whatever. Not
um,
crossroads, whatever.
yeah,
Border battle,
border
something like
border
that.
war. Yeah,
Yeah.
Missouri's not a great team. They have a good record. They've lost to Notre Dame and Kansas. So, I mean, just guessing right now, I think that'd probably be a 9 to 10 point spread for Illinois. So maybe like that you get a good quad 2 opportunity there, and then they go on break before they have Southern after Christmas on the 29th before Big Ten play starts. Joe, off the top of my head, I don't think many teams have that extra bye, or not extra but they have a bye game after Christmas. I don't think some of these other teams do. Maybe Michigan State does, but they'll get a tune-up before Big Ten play restarts in the new year. But we'll have to see, like, where they are 4th, but where is 4th place in the Big Ten? Is it, if it's 20th in the country, then 5th and 6th, they're probably not all that far behind, but, they probably drop a few spots here. I think 1-1 this week is not anything to be disappointed about. I mean, you get a road win, and then you win the road game, you lose the home game, but two fairly decent opponents. So I think maybe the ceiling isn't quite there with Illinois. I think the top three are probably going to be too hard to catch, but they might be fourth, and that might be good enough for a protected seed. All right, Joe, let's talk about Ohio State. After losing that tough one against Illinois at home, I'm going to click the wrong thing, but they have their rivalry game against West Virginia in Cleveland, and this one goes 50 minutes. They get the job done 89-88 after a tough loss to Pitt, the loss to Illinois. Like, they really needed this one, and they get the job done barely, but seems like for now we can breathe a little bit about Ohio State.
Yeah, I thought their desperation level was high. I think they needed that marquee non-conference win, and they uh, clearly Bruce Thornton and I'd say the more veteran leadership of Ohio State. I consider that to be Devin Royal, to an extent, John Mobley, and evidently Bruce Thornton. I thought that was a really masterful job by those guys uh, to take that game over. I think Bruce Thornton took like so many of the last shots in that game, and he converted. That's been a critique of him last year. He took some big shots, didn't hit them. This year, so far, so good when it comes to those situations. Now, the Illinois game, I think, was a huge missed opportunity. I do think they're gonna look back on that one and be disappointed because I thought they played that game really well at times. I just think too many of their possessions, like too many missed free throws, they just didn't do what winning teams do in March. And that's what Ohio State's trying to get back to. I do think they're somewhat on track to get back into the tournament. No bad losses. I still think they'd want that Pitter Illinois game back, but they'll have plenty of chances to do it in Big Ten play. I do think they need to be a little more consistent. I think if you could get those three guys clicking at the same time, it could be really good like it was last year. Can they find that now that they're a year older? That's my remaining question.
Yeah, the formula, they had Tilly, and they had a couple of role players, and Bynum, the freshman from Nebraska here, he might be the difference, 17-8, and that is well above what he's shown this year. I think he averages about 8 points a game. But they needed this one, and in desperate shots in the past, Joe, like you said, they have not come through. So this one was big. They can go into this North Carolina game next week with a little bit less pressure. And then they have another bye game before Big Ten play restarts. But they won on the road at Northwestern, Joe. So like Illinois, they get the road game and drop the home game. And then they're able to get a neutral court win here. I don't think West Virginia are going to be all that good. Like, this is probably a quad 2 win at best. I'm going to pull up the Big 12 here. Yeah, so West Virginia's at 101. So actually they need to get up another spot for that to be quad 2. But Ohio State down here at 48th in the net. So not the end of the world at all. They do have that. They do have the quad 1 win. That quad 3 loss to Pitt is unfortunately probably going to drag them down a little bit, but at least it's not at home like it was last year, and ultimately that did cost them in March when they ultimately missed the tournament. But Joe, there's a clear cutoff after Ohio State in terms of the net. The viewers can see at home, but Washington at 63 and below, they have a lot of work to do to get into the NCAA tournament. And you see a couple of teams with quad 1 wins in there, but it's you probably need to be in like the mid 40s to make it. Just like a ballpark. If you're not in the mid 40s, you have some work to do, but at least a couple of teams. A couple of Washington, Wisconsin, Northwestern still within striking distance, but for the teams outside the top 100, of which there are 5, time is running out, especially for some of the teams that have, taken 4 or 5 losses already. All right, Joe, well, that's all the games that we really need to talk about. Or I think we had UCLA fall to Gonzaga,
Yeah.
late, and that was mostly funny because of Mick Cronin complaining about the 8:30 local time tip. There isn't a thing that guy will not complain about, but Gonzaga is an elite team.
It happened in the Arizona game too. I think
Yeah,
UCLA is a capable team. They played with two of the top 10 teams very close. So not going to be an easy out in conference play.
Yeah, they're the same version as they've been. I think they spent big on Donovan Dent. They got a couple of their other guys back, but I just think they're probably like a 7 seed in the tournament, and they might win a game, but against the elite of the elite, they're probably going to fall. But all right, Joe, we've got a few games this week that we want to preview here. There's some games in action today. We had two big games, two big bye wins for Minnesota and Iowa, and then USC in a dogfight with Washington State right now. But let's go through the week here, Joe. We've got more bye games on Tuesday. And then we have Arizona State going to Pauley Pavilion. Arizona State just picked up a big win against Santa Clara. We have Wisconsin playing Villanova in Milwaukee. And Joe, not a Big East podcast, but both these, Villanova and Wisconsin are pretty similar right now in terms of where they are. Wisconsin 7-3, Villanova 8-2. They've had okay non-conferences where when they've played the elite competition, they've been like thoroughly beaten. This could be an early bubble battle here at the Fiserv Forum.
Yeah, I completely agree, Sean. The one thing I'll say is Wisconsin does have that little blip against TCU I wasn't a fan of. Uh,
That
and
was on a
then
neutral,
obviously
though. I think that's okay.
neutral,
Yeah.
clearly they're not going to be happy with their last competitive outing, which was not competitive at all against Nebraska. So I think this is a game Wisconsin's got to get. This is in Milwaukee, just being upfront with you. You have Central Michigan, you have Milwaukee, and then you got Purdue, UCLA, and Michigan start Big Ten play. Getting into the end of December into January on the right foot is paramount for them, I would imagine. So, maybe a must win for Wisconsin in a way. I'm not saying if they lose, they're definitively out of the tournament. I don't want to be melodramatic, but in terms of momentum and the way things have gone this year, I think they'd like to. It's good they beat Marquette, but is that win going to age very well? No. BYU destroyed them. TCU was thoroughly dominated, then Nebraska. So this is what I feel like they got to have.
Yeah, and I think you could sub out Wisconsin with Villanova there too, Joe. They've played a ton of bye games, won them all, lost to BYU like Wisconsin did, and then Villanova lost to Michigan, as we talked about earlier. Both teams looking for a win. Like, this is very important. We're going to come back to this one and potentially circle it, and that's Friday night, 8 o'clock Eastern on Fox. Saturday, Joe, we've got the CBS Sports Classic. Ohio State plays North Carolina. A really, really important game here for Ohio State. North Carolina has positioned themselves as probably one of the top 15 teams in the country. Ohio State gets that non-conference win against West Virginia. It's about whether they can parlay that into another big game here. But North Carolina is really good, especially in the forward department. Henry Vasar, Caleb Wilson. Potentially in the guard department is where Ohio State and Bruce Thornton and Mobley could take an advantage. But this is an important one for the Buckeyes.
It's a huge game for Ohio State, Sean. No quad one wins so far, I believe. Is the Northwestern one count as one? I don't
I
believe
think
so.
it says one on the
Okay.
net
So,
rankings here, but I'm struggling to find out who it is. Well, you can talk about it a little bit, and I'll inspect this team sheet.
yeah, assuming it'd be Northwestern, but getting to this game, Sean, this is one where I think two of the three got to be on. Whether that's Royal, I know Tilly helps out occasionally, but it really comes down to Royal Mobley and the ringleader Bruce Thornton. Uh, Ohio State's won games like this in the past. I believe last year they beat Kentucky in this same CBS Sports Classic. So I don't think this is a team that's afraid to go into these neutral sites and win. But one issue is going to be, Sean, is can they be consistent for entire 40 minutes? Jake Diebler's talked about that a lot this year. In most of their games, unless they're playing a Michigan, Purdue, Michigan State, I think what they do really well is score on volume, take high quality looks, and get their playmakers the ball. Can they do that for a complete 40 minutes? We saw it for like 30 or so minutes against Illinois. We saw it against Northwestern for the most part, even. And then we saw it in spurts in West Virginia, which is why that game was so close. Can they do it for 40 minutes here? Because I really believe, Sean, if Ohio State plays a complete game here, they'll win. And they might do it by not in dominating fashion, but they might do it by 2 or 3 possessions by the end. I don't think North Carolina, maybe Kumar or you might disagree, is as good as their top 15 billing is. I do think Ohio State playing a good game is more likely to win than not.
I think North Carolina is pretty good. I think that's probably a fair ranking, but they're a different level than like the top of this sport right now. Like Louisville, Duke in their conference, and the top three in the Big Ten. I think Illinois is probably a pretty good, you know, match for North Carolina, and Ohio State took them down to the wire. So if you play a little better down the stretch, you might be able to get the job done here. Joe, the game's in Georgia. Don't know if that's a real big geographical advantage for anybody. Don't think it really will. Of course, the other game there is Kentucky and St. John's, maybe
UCLA or
UCLA. Well,
maybe.
we're,
Oh
we're gonna
no, not
see. Yeah,
UCLA.
we would see
Sorry.
it up soon if it was UCLA.
Yeah.
UCLA has been in this before, but maybe since they joined the Big Ten, they're out of it. But I will research that next when we're talking about this Indy Classic, Joe, which has two a back to back of Big Ten
It is
teams
St.
here.
John's, by the
It
way.
is St.
Sorry.
John's, yeah, because there's a game at Madison Square Garden on the Saturday, and that's not including St. John's, so I figured they'd be somewhere else. We've got two Big Ten teams here in this Indy Classic, Joe. We've got Northwestern playing against Butler. Butler's a team that has a pretty good net ranking, and 8-2. They've had a pretty solid season. Northwestern has a chance here to pick up a quality victory, and they might need it.
Yeah, they definitely will need it. They started out 0-2 in conference play. I think Nick Martinelli and Arrington Page have been pretty good for them this year. The bottom line is, I don't think this is a big game for Northwestern so much so as depth of the conference. Because let's face it, Northwestern's probably that upper lower class, if
You know, like
that's even a
10th,
proper term.
11th.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'd go 12, 13. But regardless, Sean,
Butler's
this
fourth
would
or
be
fifth in the Big East, so it's good to see where
yeah,
the conference is measured.
yeah. Because if they win this game, I think it's a very strong side for the conference. To be honest with you, Sean, I'm probably chalking this up as a loss for Northwestern. I think crowd wise, Butler will be heavily favored there, and I also think Northwestern hasn't showed me a lot this year against high quality
Yeah,
opponents.
they haven't really been thoroughly defeated by any. Like 5 point loss to Virginia, 5 point loss to OK State, 12 point loss against Wisconsin, 4 point loss to Ohio State. Like they're not being like thoroughly dominated in these games, but like all of these teams are on the NCAA tournament fringe right now. So if they're getting outplayed by all of them, it seems like there's a little bit of a theme there. Um, like you said, Joe, like Butler, this is in their backyard, probably a 15-minute drive from the campus. Purdue also is the second game here, so I'm assuming a lot of fans there as well. It's going to be tough for them, of course. If they win it, I think we're looking at them at 7-4 a whole lot differently. Um, and then they actually play Valparaiso first, so they're going to be 7-4 going into this game probably, and they play Howard um, after Christmas. Like if they're 8-4 going into conference play starting up again, they host Minnesota to start. So like maybe there is a path to a little bit of a springboard here with this victory, but Joe, I don't see it either. I think Butler's a really solid team. Former Buckeye coach Thad Matta has been there for a couple years. Hasn't really got them off the ground, but this year they're a little different. So watch out for them. All right, we've got Maryland going to Virginia on the road, Joe. Maryland is a team that has struggled at times this year. Pharrell Payne has been injured a couple times. Not sure what's going on there, but Virginia's a really solid team on the road. This is going to be a tough one for Maryland.
Yeah, this is a game where Maryland might want to use another shooting performance like they did against Michigan. I think Maryland is a very I think effort's there. I don't think the talent is there. I know the fan base has been pretty upset about that. But I do think they get good production out of their bench guys. Miles Rice, Darius Adams, I think is a future star if he sticks around there. So there are pieces in place here for them to be good. My main problem with Maryland is shot selection. I think against Michigan, their shot selection the first half was really good. The second half, you see it dip off, and I love their intensity on the offensive boards, but this is a team mentally, getting some of the chippiness and technical fouls, they need to tone that down a bit because I think if they did that against Michigan and Pharrell Payne doesn't get injured, that game's probably going down to the wire. So to me, this is probably the first game where Buzz Williams could say, "All right, I have 11 games worth of work here. I know what we are. I bet you he'll put a good game plan out there." To me, it's going to be whether they execute, whether they choose the good shots, and whether they crash the boards effectively in this one. And to be quite frank, Sean, I think they do win this game.
Virginia is a little bit of a different animal than we've seen in the past. Ryan Odom is their coach. He was UMBC, Utah State, and then VCU. He's a really good coach. They play up and down. I think like Buzz might like want to play into that, and I don't know if that's the best for Maryland. Going up and down with a team like Virginia, so I think it's going to be tough. But if they win this, Joe, maybe we look at their season a little bit differently. They've played a few true road games already. They won one at Marquette. Like that shouldn't be the cause for them to lose here. It just might be that they might not be the better team. But we have a Bucknell at Iowa, game 2 of the Indy Classic, probably the one of the better games of truly a loaded Saturday, Joe, not just in the Big Ten, but elsewhere. We've got Houston and Arkansas playing at the Prudential Center in Newark. We have Texas Tech and Duke at MSG. Like, this is an awesome, awesome slate. Might get lost a little bit. There's 2 NFL games, 3 college football playoff games on Saturday, but still a pretty good college basketball slate. We've got Stephen Pearl and Auburn going up to Gainbridge Fieldhouse to play Purdue. Joe, after the humbling that Purdue took to Iowa State, they beat Minnesota handily, only up 3 at halftime, but then they blitzed them out of the gym in the second half. And Auburn is coming off of a couple of blitzes at the hands of elite teams. Also, they're 8-3. They got smoked at Arizona. They lost to Houston by 1, and then they got smoked by Michigan at Players Era. So Auburn has proven that they're probably not the elite team that we've seen in past years, while they're still pretty solid. And Purdue, on the other hand, has a couple really good wins this year. That really bad loss at home. What do you see happening here in Indy?
It's tough, Sean, because I think both teams are. I know Purdue thrashed Marquette, but again, how seriously are we going to take a 5-6 Marquette if they were at Marquette?
They're 163 in the net, so chances are you have
And that too.
Buy game that's higher than that.
Yeah, to me, I want to see if Purdue could get this bench going. I know they've tried doing that in the past, and it hasn't really worked. I think we know what at this point, being that they're senior players, we know what Braden, Oscar Clough, TKR, and Fletcher Lawyer are going to bring to the table. Maybe they could get someone else to step up. That's been my critique all year of the Boilermakers, because at this point it's getting ridiculous to have Braden Smith carry the load every night. I don't think that's the recipe for them to be elite. I think he's probably still one of the best players in the country, but I think they need to change it a bit. I'm going to be a little critical of Matt Painter here. If they're going to challenge Michigan and Michigan State for the conference crown, they need to find some other kind of synergy. I think this is a game you could test that out.
I think I agree with the fact, Joe. If they want to be a 4 or 5 seed in the tournament and make the Sweet 16, I think they can do that. But it's do they want to win the Big Ten and potentially be a number 1 seed and all that? Like, they need more from Meyer and Benter. Not they don't need more. They've shown some signs. Can you get that more consistently? And in terms of Auburn, like, don't really know if they have the formula that can cause Purdue some problems. Like, Iowa State was just so long and athletic, and then they made a ton of threes on top of that. Auburn has a few shades of that, but we just saw Purdue a couple weeks ago go down to Alabama and win, and Alabama's a pretty similar team to Auburn, maybe a little better version of Auburn. So I think Purdue doesn't roll here, but I think it's a game where they're up 7-8 at halftime and they're up by 10 for a majority of the second half, and Auburn just can't really get it that close. But I think Purdue gets the job done here, and it'll wrap up a pretty successful non-con for them. Joe, we have some FranCon at the Rack to end the day, 8 o'clock on BTN. Rutgers needs that to get back to 500. But Fran's back at the Rack. His Penn team's been pretty fun if you've watched them. But other than that, Joe, that's pretty much all we have. Or let's see Sunday. Is there any...
Gonzaga, Oregon. So
Gonzaga, Oregon on Sunday, yep.
Yeah, that's That could be interesting. Probably not, though, to be completely honest with you. I think the most interesting game shot of the non-con is that Purdue Auburn game, not because of ranking or anything. I truly believe that game could go so many different directions uh, that it's probably worth the watch because I could see either team blowing the other one out. I could see it being and see that game being a back and forth, very tight game that comes down to the end as well,
And
based
when
on the trajectory of both
and
teams.
when Purdue has brought an SEC team to this Indy game 2 years in a row, and they lost to Texas A&M last year in this spot. So could they get over the hump there? I think Auburn last year and Texas A&M last year are pretty comparable. But Oregon, Joe, they play Gonzaga here in at the Moda Center in Portland. I don't like Gonzaga is a. I don't know if Gonzaga will get down there fans wise for that game, but Oregon is in show me time, Joe. They're 5-5. They've lost a lot of games here. They have not gotten really any production outside of their top two in Shellstat and Biddle, and Shellstat has been down. Biddle has been down with a couple injuries, but they might need this to get their season back on track.
Yeah.
But when well, let me just check real quick to see who they have the rest of the non-con. But I think Dana Altman's teams have been great at the end of the year in the past, but he might have dug himself too big of a hole here because they have been really alarming. If we go to the net here, they're at 129 in the net. They're below Penn State.
Yeah.
They're 0-4 in the top two quads. They have a quad 3 loss. Not exactly what we thought when we probably the best returning dynamic duo outside of Purdue, and they have not been good so far. But Joe, I think we'll wrap it up there. Pittsburgh playing Penn State and Hershey. Not really a couple other
More of a name brand than anything,
a,
to be
a
honest.
couple of other bye games. We've got the border war on Monday between Missouri and Illinois, but that's more than a week away. So hopefully we'll get to the listeners before then. So we're going to wrap it up here. Thank you everybody for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.